Ladies and gentlemen, if I could ask everyone to take a seat, please. That's the sound of freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Chief Master Sergeant Retired Eric Jaron. Welcome to the National Museum of the United States Air Force. This morning, as we enter Memorial Day weekend, we pause our daily lives to honor those who have dedicated their lives to serving our country. At this time, please stand for the presentation of the colors by the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Honor Guard and the singing of the national anthem by Master Sergeant Allison Jones of the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Band of Flight.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Oh.
Please be seated. I would like to thank all of the Air Force and community leaders who have joined us today. A special thanks to Lieutenant General Retired Jack Hudson, the Director of the National Museum of the United States Air Force. Thank you for joining us today, sir. Today's ceremony is hosted by the Air Force Museum Foundation, the philanthropic corporation that funds facility expansions and program support for the National Museum of the United States Air Force. Representing the foundation are Colonel Retired Susan Richardson, President of the Board of Trustees, Air Force Museum Foundation. And Mr. Mike Imhoff, Executive Director of the Air Force Museum Foundation. Today's guest speakers are Colonel Retired Susan Richardson, Mr. Dan Oliver and Mr. John Luchin, National Museum of the United States Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel Retired Michael Vollmer, Corporate Pilot and Director of Maintenance and Safety for Soin International, and our keynote speaker, Mr. David Williamson, partner at Beazer Greer Attorneys at Law. We also appreciate the support of Ed Smith Flowers and Gifts and the Oakwood Florist for the donation of flowers used in today's ceremony. Following the ceremony, guests are encouraged to come forward to place flowers at the data plate wall. And finally, on the occasion of this Memorial Day weekend, we extend a very special thank you to the veterans who have joined us here this morning. Thank you all for coming. I invite Father Michael Kreutzer of St. Mark's Episcopal Church to come forward and deliver the invocation.
Creator of all, we remember before you with grateful hearts all those who will be honored on this data plate wall, as well as all the men and women of our country who in the day of decision ventured much for the liberties we now enjoy. Grant that we may not rest until all the people of this land share the benefits of true freedom and gladly accept its disciplines. We commend to your gracious care in keeping all the men and women of our armed forces at home and abroad. Defend them day by day with your heavenly grace. Strengthen them in their trials and temptations. Give them courage to face the perils which beset them, and grant them a sense of your abiding presence wherever they may be. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Father Kreutzer. Our first speaker retired from the Air Force in 2005. She served 26 years as an aerospace physiologist. She is the president of the Board of Trustees for the Air Force Museum Foundation and a volunteer for the National Museum of the United States Air Force. Please welcome Colonel Susan Richardson.
Well, good morning. On behalf of the Air Force Museum Foundation, I want to welcome you to the United States Air Force Museum Data Plate Wall of Honor Tribute Ceremony. That I think it's appropriate with this crowd to remind you why we have data plates. Many museums have bricks to honor individuals, but we have data plates. And that's a great piece of history. It dates back to World War I, when airplanes were made out of wood and cloth. And when there were crashes, and there were many crashes, when there were crashes, the fires would burn these planes beyond recognition. And so the U.S. Army Air Service decided to give every plane its own unique data plate. That particular plate identified that airplane as unique, and they were always able to identify which plane it was. And here we have data plates for unique individuals. Many special people here, and I know they're special. You know how I know they're special? Is because somebody has taken the time to put their name on this wall because they made such an impact on their lives. Maybe they made an impact on many lives. And so we see here veterans, family members, volunteers, employees, all on this wall. And now we have 950 of these data plates. We have almost 1,000 of them on order, and that is thanks to you. And we really, really appreciate that. And thank you so much for coming today, because we're going to get to hear only just four of these remarkable stories.
Thank you, Colonel Richardson. Our next speakers are from the Operations and Exhibits Divisions of the National Museum of the United States Air Force. Please welcome Mr. Dan Oliver and Mr. John Luchin.
Thank you, Chief Jaron, General Hudson, Colonel Richardson, Mr. Emhoff, Colonel Vollmer, and Mr. Williamson. Thank you so much for being here. And to all others in attendance today, good morning. It's my honor to be able to speak about Jeff today. Jeff Fisher was one of my coworkers, and in a few minutes I'll ask John Luchin III, Tim Davis, the supervisor, to come forward with some remarks about Tim, another coworker who's honored today. We're glad to have with us today family, friends, present and former coworkers of both the Fisher and Davis families, and many other family members and individuals with data plates that are going up today. Welcome. I would begin by saying that the data plate program is such a great way to honor service. And there are many ways that people have service to this great nation. It can be any type of service. There are many here who have dedicated data plates honoring loved ones who served in the military services. We have family members who place data plates for other former museum staff and volunteer staff who served at the museum, some that are no longer with us. However, there's a very common denominator through all this, and that's remembrance of service, giving back to this great country. At times I've considered placing a data plate for my father's service in World War II in Korea in the Marines, as well as my son's service in the Marine Reserves. They both stood on those same painted steps just outside Parris Island. If we've got any Marines here, they know what those are. But at other times I've thought better, realizing that my father, being the Marine that he was, he would probably come back and haunt me for putting something in an Air Force institution. So I'm considering bricks at the National Marine Corps Museum in Quantico. That might work a little better. But here we have data plates to grandparents, fathers, mothers, uncles, aunts, sons, daughters. I mean, it's a powerful service. Behind me on this wall, the original wall, are two to my great friend Jack Smay, who passed away while serving in the Facilities Museum at the museum a little over 5 years ago. And Jack truly loved this place. He put his heart and soul into working here. And like Jack, Jeff Fisher loved this place as well. They were civilians who made a difference in this great museum. And now about Jeff. Jeff began his career here in March of 1989, just a few short months after I was hired in December of '88. We both worked in the audiovisual branch of the operations division. It's hard to believe that was over 27 years ago now. We were known as those long-haired AV guys. That's what Jeff used to go by. If you remember, Jeff had the long ponytail, and I guess I just got the long hair. But he was hired as a motion picture projectionist originally, because we used to show films in the Carney Auditorium. It's a part-time job, 20 hours a week. And he also worked part-time running films in several theaters around the Middletown area. And there was a gentleman that was the other projectionist here. His name was Harold Greiser. He was at Normandy. He was a World War II vet. And he actually recommended Jeff for a position because he knew him down in Middletown. And Harold, we affectionately referred to Harold as H-Bomb. If anybody remembers Harold, he was a character. But since the job was part-time, he continued his other jobs, painting houses. He was an interior and exterior house painter, and Jeff could paint an entire room in the time it would take me to cut a window. He was just so quick and just a real craftsman when it came to painting. And he always signed his work somewhere. If you knew Jeff, and I can't do this backwards, so I'll do it sideways. Jeff would sign his work in his painting job. Somewhere on the wall, he'd sign J-E-F-F, and then he'd draw a picture of a fish and then put the E-R. And if you look in any of the houses that Jeff painted, if you look hard enough, you'll find that. Jeff had some great personal interests, some of which came in handy on the job. He was just a talented artist, and he made custom jewelry, craft he learned while working at a jeweler in Middletown. He liked to give silver bracelets to those he cared for. I remember him presenting one to General Lyles on the occasion of his retirement from AFMC. For those who knew Jeff, they knew he loved the outdoors. He loved climbing, rappelling, anything outdoors. He liked to swim, he had a boat. One time we needed telephone cables strung to the special events office on the second floor. And as Jeff described it, he hung like a monkey over the art gallery 60 feet up in the air, running those cables over to the special events office. He liked skateboarding, competition kite flying. He also loved music, playing the guitar and the dobro. And Jeff had a scary, scary memory for detail. He always used to say he was full of useless information. You didn't want to try to beat him at Jeopardy, I'll tell you that much. And he loved people, and he loved history. After a few years, Jeff moved on into a full-time AV specialist job in support of special events. And at the time, I was a supervisor. In those days, I had a pretty quick temper at times. Mood stabilizers are a wonderful thing. I'm a much kinder, gentler person these days. But on more than one occasion, Jeff, as he always preferred to be known, became Jeffrey if he was in trouble. And he always told me I sounded just like his mom when I barked at him like that. Jeff had a great eye for detail. He was very creative, made videos for events, helped with the exhibits division at times. And following a reorg, Jeff became the museum photographer, the job that he definitely loved most. To my left, to your right, there's a panel that stood at Jeff's exhibition of his photographs that he had done over the years. When he and I started here, there was just these two buildings here. The modern flight hangar was only a couple years old. There wasn't a tree over 8 feet tall out in the Memorial Park, and you see it now. The trees are beautiful. There were only 137 memorials in the park when we started, and now there's over 600. Jeff, myself, Walt Barner, and Jeff Becker had a hand in supporting each dedication, and we took each one personal. Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney dedicated the 8th Air Force Tower out there many years ago. There were just so many great events. We had a Medal of Honor recipient ceremony in the Modern Flight Gallery, and I've never heard a more silent ceremony with over 3,000 people in attendance. Jeff served Air Force heroes at the museum in one way or another, taking pictures, running the microphone. Like myself, I'm usually over there. This is a little different for me being up here, but he met many World War II, Korea, Vietnam vets, Doolittle Raiders. He had a special relationship with Tom Griffin. Tom has a data play right behind me here. But the biggest thing I want to remember about Jeff is he had a warm smile, a gentleness with people, and a big heart. I'm proud to have called him my friend, my coworker, a recipient of a Museum of the Month award that I've recommended him for, and most importantly, a true member of the museum family. I will mention a few things about Tim. Jeff and I worked with Tim quite a bit, putting alarms in the exhibits, and Tim was just an awesome individual and person. And I learned talking to some of his former co-workers over at the 4950th Test Wing when they worked in the model shop over there with his brother Gib. He certainly looked up to his brother Gib and would defend a family member or close friend to the ends of the earth. Many of my former and still current staff members of the museum worked in the mod shop in Building 5 and had the opportunity to come back and work in Building 5 for the museum. Very different environment these days, but I'll tell you, in those days, it was crazy over there. They could build anything. They were craftsmen with varying skills. Tim was a model maker, a wood pattern maker, a true master carpenter, and he could build anything with precision and detail. He was soft-spoken, with a unique sense of humor, an active listener, an outstanding coworker and friend. Now I'd like to invite John Lucian to come forward. and speak a little more on Tim's behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I started working with Tim in 2005. Tim had been at the museum much longer than I had when I got there, but Tim is very soft-spoken. Tim was also very willing to help at all times. Tim was the first person that I would see every morning when I came in, and that's something that definitely took a little while to get used to not seeing him anymore. Tim fixed everything. I've spoken to his family many times about this. He did it at home and he did it at work as well. Every major exhibit that we've put together over the last decade that has won an Air Force Heritage Award, Tim had something to do with it, including our latest, which is the Tuskegee Airmen exhibit in the World War II gallery. Tim was the lead exhibit specialist on that. Tim also fixed all of our exhibit repairs. A fact that some of you may not know is that there is a tracking list of all of the exhibit repairs through all of the galleries, and our volunteers walk through daily and write those up. Tim took care of them so well that some of us took for granted everything that he did. Early in the year, those things started to pile up, and the repair list just got larger and larger. And every day that I would come over to the mailbox, there would be more there. I brought them over to Building 5, and they soon started to disappear. I said to our exhibit production specialist, Will Haas, I said, Will, where are all of the repair lists going? And Will said, well, Tim did all of that stuff. Tim is just the one that took care of them. And I said, okay. He said, so I've just been filing them in that drawer over there. And I laughed and I said, that's probably not a good plan. So we're going to have to come up with a new one. But it was a physical representation for everything that Tim Davis took care of. And he took care of all of us. I like to think that he was the shop counselor. Tim was incredibly quiet, but he was a very good listener. And people would spend a lot of time in the morning telling Tim about their problems, and he would listen and shake his head, and I think sometimes wish that people were not at his bench as often as they were. But that's the kind of guy that he was. So I'll try to keep this brief, as Tim would definitely want it. I would like to say to his family, thank you for attending today. In particular, I would like to say to his two sons, Ben and Brent, it was an honor and a privilege to know and work with your father, and I sincerely thank you for sharing him with us and with the museum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver and Mr. Luchin. Our next speaker retired from the United States Air Force Reserve in 2015. He served 31 years in multiple capacities, including aircraft mechanic, instructor pilot, maintenance officer, logistics officer, and commander of both an active duty squadron and a reserve squadron. In his civilian career, he has been an airline pilot, chief pilot, vice president of flight operations and COO, and has flown over 40 different types of aircraft. He is currently a corporate pilot and director of maintenance and safety with Soin International. He also serves as a Big Brothers Big Sisters youth mentor and volunteer instructor pilot in the Experimental Aircraft Association's Young Eagles program. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lieutenant Colonel Mike Vollmer.
Thank you, Chief Jaron. What Eric didn't tell you is that of the 30 of the 31 years he and I have known each other, we were both airmen at Travis Air Force Base many years ago. Well, everybody, thanks for being here, and thank you for indulging me in letting me tell you a little bit about Tom Krull. His plaque reads, Lieutenant Colonel Tom Krull, Airman, Mentor, Hero, 26 February 24 to 9 December 11. Tom and I met in 1987 at the Travis Aero Club, and like many of his generation, he was unassuming, humble, and kind. What initially stood out to me was Tom's pure blonde hair, even at his age, with a perfectly sculpted flat top, 1960s flat top haircut. And also the fact that he had more wrinkles than a Shar-Pei dog So many so that you couldn't tell if his eyes were open or they were closed when he was looking at you. He walked hunched over, spoke with an age-weathered voice, and the animation of an orangutan. He always had his arms in the air when he was talking, and referred to everyone as young man or young lady. He later confessed to me that at his age it was a safe bet. Everyone was younger than him. And he was always in a very delightful mood. That's the way he would put it. Just delightful. I, at the time, was 21 years old, had recently escaped the farms of Wisconsin, and enlisted in the Air Force as a jet engine mechanic. And I was dead set on being an Air Force pilot. I was also dead broke. You see, as an airman first class, you don't make a whole lot of money. And I was working second and third jobs, pumping gas, washing airplanes, delivering pizzas, anything I could to make a buck to fly an hour. And I didn't have enough money to finish my instrument rating at the Travis Aero Club. And the instrument rating was the pivotal rating for you to get accepted into officer training school and pilot training, at least in that day and age. I'd sold my prized possession, my 1979 Mustang Indy 500 pace car, to finance the endeavor, but I still ran short. Tom took note of me washing airplanes out on the ramp and helping the club mechanics fix aircraft, and asked me why I wasn't flying. "Young man, why aren't you flying that much anymore?" he would say. And keep in mind, Tom was not my instructor at the time. He was just, to me, he was some old dude at the Aero Club. Hearing my plight, he asked what my goals were, and I gladly let him know, because at that time I was seeking advice from anyone that was older than me and had gone down that road. Well, he sat there and he thought for a little bit, with his eyes open or closed, I don't know. And then, knowing I was an aircraft mechanic, he said, "Would you do me a favor?" He said, my aircraft, which was a very nice Piper Arrow aircraft, just pristine, he said he had a problem with it, and he'd like me to help him test fly it to troubleshoot it the next day. To which I readily agreed, because at that time I'd do anything to get an hour of flying time. So the next day, Tom and I took off, and I shortly realized there was absolutely nothing wrong with his airplane. First hint was when he put foggles on. And for those of you that have gone through pilot training, foggles are things that restrict your vision, so all you can see are the instruments. And it quickly turned into an instrument flying lesson. During our debrief, Tom asked if I would do him the favor to help him troubleshoot his aircraft again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, until I finished my rating. I made it very clear to Tom that I didn't have the money to pay him, because I was a struggling airman, working several jobs, going to school full-time, working full-time, and I just couldn't pay him. And he just looked at me again, eyes open or shut, couldn't tell, and just said, "Just do the same for someone else when you can." Well, I finished all my ratings, became an instructor at the Aero Club, got picked up for officer training school and Air Force pilot training. Some years later, what I discovered was that Tom was not just some old dude at the club. He was a very accomplished aviator and businessman. He flew in 3 wars. He flew P-40s in World War II, and a few other smatterings of aircraft, because at that time he said, "You just hopped in anyone that was on the ramp." He flew P-51s early in the Korean conflict. And later, as a lieutenant colonel, he volunteered to fly O-1s, the bird dogs, in Vietnam. During a military hiatus after Korea, Tom flew U-2s for a 3-letter company that will go unnamed, in which he set an altitude record in the U-2C model. Shortly thereafter, he had to dead stick that same airplane into a very austere field in China. You can read about that in the book, The Dragon Lady, and also just before I came out here, I checked the Air Force, or the museum bookstore, and in the book, 50 Years of the U-2, Tom is mentioned 6 times, and that dead stick event is one of those times. Tom also delivered the U-2 to Francis Gary Powers, who you may know from the movie Bridge of Spies if you're not a history buff, but it was the same U-2 that Francis Powers was shot down in that movie. Well, in real life, the movie was just, portraying that. After the military, Tom was very successful in business. He chose to retire early, buy a Piper Arrow, and instruct at a military aero club, Travis Aero Club. During our time together, Tom taught me many things about flying and life in general. He had several sayings that resonate with me still today. One I hear every time I fly, and that's no kidding. Every time I fly, I hear Tom Kroll's voice say, "Always check final. That'll save your life someday, young man." And I can honestly say it has. Another saying is, just do it for someone else someday when you can. Tom taught me not only how to save my life by checking final, he taught me how to enrich my life by doing the same for others when I could, by paying it forward. You see, Tom's wrinkles were well earned in the sun-filled greenhouse of a fighter cockpit. His weathered voice from the many years of service to his country. His hunched back from too much time teetering on the edge of space in a spacesuit in the U-2. His animation and speaking from his love of life and his perpetual good nature and delightful attitude from the satisfaction of paying it forward. Tom Kroll was an airman, Tom Kroll was a mentor, and Tom Kroll, in my mind, is a hero. And I found it fitting to honor him here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Colonel Vollmer. Today's keynote speaker, he received his JD degree from The Ohio State University in 1978. He has practiced law in numerous states, primarily for business and commercial litigation, professional practice, representation, and white-collar criminal defense. He has served as the president of the Dayton Bar Association, is currently a board member of the Greater Dayton Regional Transit Authority, and the current president of the Rotary Club of Dayton, the Rotary Club home of Orville Wright. He is currently an attorney and partner with the law firm of Beezer, Greer, and Landis. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Mr. David Williamson.
General Hudson, Colonel Richardson, Colonel Vollmer, honorees, families, veterans, guests, fellow Americans. It is a phrase we hear all of the time. I was just doing my job. I've heard it spoken by persons faced with extraordinary circumstances and by persons in less than extraordinary circumstances who did not understand the importance and significance of their supportive role in a much larger endeavor. I've heard it from my father's World War II generation, and I've heard it from those members of the military who have served in peacetime, far from harm's way. It is a phrase of humility, one that seems to be offered by persons whom we civilians might consider to be heroes. Yet when they say, I was just doing my job, they really mean it. It amazes me when we rightfully pause, as we do today, to honor these persons the rest of us view as heroes. They do not see themselves that way. They see themselves as having just done my job. And the appointed hero becomes even more embarrassed about achieving a status he or she feels somehow they don't deserve. We gather today to acknowledge a number of airmen who have performed acts of bravery, which is fully justified. But remember, only about 10% of those who have worn a uniform ever serve in combat, and even a lesser percentage actually engage the enemy. Yet the United States Air Force remains the largest and most technically advanced aerial fighting force in the world. So when we pause to honor and thank those who have served, as we do today, we honor and thank every one of them who has just done their job. Now, a lot of civilian misperceptions come from popular culture. When Maverick hops into his F-14, or Will Smith goes after some giant alien spacecraft in his F-18, what never makes it onto the movie screen are the hours of tedious maintenance that go into making that possible. A newer aircraft will have only about 6 hours of maintenance for every flight hour. That number goes up as the plane ages. An older aircraft, as Colonel Vollmer will tell you, needs a mind-boggling 40 to 60 man-hours of maintenance per hour of flight. Now, for those of you who remember, try to picture an old Nintendo video game from your youth or an old G.I. Joe playset that had this maintenance schedule. You wash your plane every 14 days, take the panels off and hand wipe the interior every 28. You do flight control maintenance every 56 days and take everything apart once a year. And don't forget, phase inspections for metal fatigue, the independent inspections by military higher-ups, the conditional inspections after the plane has had a hard landing, the engine inspections after every 150 and 300 flight hours, inspections of the flight recorder after every 10 flight hours, and all of that is on a plane that is working perfectly. This doesn't even count the time spent on fixing stuff that breaks. And this is just about keeping the over 5,000 planes in the fleet in the air. Oh, not counting the 450 ICBMs and 63 satellites in working order. But with over 300,000 active personnel, 177,000 civilian personnel, and a $140 billion budget, if you'll excuse my pun, you need another small army just to keep up with the demands of running such a large organization of human beings. From payroll to healthcare to cooking meals and driving trucks to using computers to fixing computers. From running a warehouse to running a museum. The overwhelming number of airmen serve in the sometimes tedious but always mission-critical work of maintaining air supremacy and air superiority. None of this is possible without a whole lot of people just doing their job. Now, two such persons we honor today. My sister, retired Lieutenant Colonel Janet Kovach, and her husband, my brother-in-law, retired Lieutenant Colonel Tom Kovach, who have joined us today all the way from Tacoma, Washington. Neither of them feels that they belong on this wall of honor. They feel that they're just a couple of kids from Ohio who got lucky and blessed and do not think that they did anything spectacular. I'll let you be the judge. My sister and I came from a family of 5 children who grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. Our father transported German POWs from Boston to camps in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas during World War II until he was accepted into the Army Airborne Paratroopers, earned his jump pin, and was training for the big jump into Japan when the war ended. Our mom was a USO girl who mastered the earliest form of Facebook, exchanging postcards with almost every GI she served from her canteen in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Our parents neither encouraged nor discouraged any of us from entering the military. It simply was never discussed as a career option. My sister Jan, nicknamed Crazy Jan by her sorority sisters, graduated from Ohio University in 1972 with a degree in education at a time when there was a glut of young female baby boomers coming out of college with a degree in education. Good teaching jobs were hard to come by. But a professor at Ohio University saw something in Jan and said, "You know, you'd be good for the Air Force, and the Air Force would be good for you." Now, mind you, this was during Vietnam. And in 1972, it was a time when ground forces were being reduced and the Air Force mission expanded and intensified. The largest B-52 raid of the war happened that year. This was also a time when only about 2% of the entire military was female. So, you might be right to think that this might not have been a good time for a girl from Ohio with an education degree and no military experience to enlist in the Air Force. But my big sister, who has a big heart, also has a hard head. And she thought she could stand on that head, if she had to, for 4 years. And besides, the money was better than substitute teaching. So after OTS, she was commissioned as a second lieutenant. The Air Force immediately recognized her talent in teaching other teachers how to teach. She started at Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington, at the Basic Survival School, which required her to finish the Tropical Survival School with just her and 27 men in the jungles of Panama. Then she went to Senbach Air Base in Germany in a headquarters section command job. Next was Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama, where she taught at the Academic Instructors School. Then on to Colorado Springs in the admissions office of the Academy. After a tour at Norton Air Force Base in California, she eventually became a wing commander at McChord Air Force Base in Tacoma, Washington, where nearby she and her husband live today. In June 1991, Mount Pinatubo, a volcano situated near Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, erupted. My sister, Crazy Jan Kovac, would command the group at McChord Air Force Base that would be responsible for the stateside incoming part of the evacuation and relocation of most of 20,000 military personnel and their dependents that were evacuated from the Philippines. In what was part of Operation Fiery Vigil, and think about this, the timely evacuation of an entire United States Air Force base from foreign soil back to the United States. 13,000 people came through Jan's location. Jan would serve for 20 years in the Air Force, retiring as a lieutenant colonel. She will tell you, "I was just doing my job." Now, unknown to any of us, while we were growing up in Youngstown, Ohio, just down the road, a young man was growing up in Wooster, Ohio, named Tom Kovac. Tom's dad was a tool and die maker and a member of what Tom Brokaw called the greatest generation. But Tom's passion was golf, and he was very good at it. So good that his high school golf coach and pro at the club where he worked thought he could earn a golf scholarship for college. And realistically, this was Tom's only shot at a college degree. But he was a good student with a particular sports skill, and most importantly, he had good eyes. It was his coach who mentioned to him about the Air Force Academy. Well, Tom didn't even know where that was. But lo and behold, they were interested in him. Tom golfed at the academy as part of the Falcons golf team, but he also learned to fly. No, not those fighter jets, but those big, lumbering transports that we're hearing today and that we, the uninitiated, feel are never going to get off the ground. But we that live here in Dayton have the honor of staring in wonder at their touch and goes and training runs. Tom flew the C-141, was instructor qualified, and flew airdrop and air refueling. He airdropped paratrooper trainees at Fort Benning and was part of the most spectacular buildup of military force in history. You see, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in 1990. The United States had no forces nearby. But within 6 months, 525,000 American troops were on the ground and equipped in the Persian Gulf region. Tom Kovac, who flew missions into Dhahran Air Base, was part of Operation Desert Storm. Tom, who now flies for Delta Airlines, also in the Air Force, flew support for Air Force Two, the Vice President's plane, and for the Air Force Thunderbirds. Now, Tom will tell you that his greatest thrill in the Air Force was flying the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders to an air show where the Thunderbirds were performing. Yes, even tasked with such tough duty as flying America's most celebrated cheerleading squad, Tom will also tell you, I was just doing my job. Heroes, you bet. If keeping the peace means always standing ready and being prepared for conflict, then every man and woman who has contributed to keeping our United States Air Force on the ready is a hero. And yes, I said our United States Air Force because that is the other reason we honor them today, because they have kept the Air Force ours. Defending our country is more than standing ready to use the force of arms when necessary. It also means defending our society, our institutions, and our way of life. President William McKinley, an Ohioan who lived in Canton, ironically halfway between Youngstown and Worcester, and who served in the Union Army during the Civil War, said, "The government of the United States rests on the hearts and consciences of the people. It is their government. It represents them. It is the agent of their will. And while we are not a military government or a military people, we never lack for soldiers on any cause which the people espouse." Our communities are full of everyday heroes who once served in uniform and continue to serve as solid citizens. They are now nurses, school teachers, addiction counselors, business owners, community leaders, social workers, coaches, pastors, probation officers, plumbers, bankers, truck drivers, and accountants who strive every day to keep America from slipping toward the kind of despair, chaos, and violence that we see on our computer screens and television screens every day. They guide people from hopelessness toward productive lives. Society collapses without them, yet we rarely give them the thanks and gratitude they so richly deserve. We could not survive without these people and the lessons they learned and the lives they lived in uniform, which they carry over to their lives today. They may think now that they live what appear to be ordinary lives, but to us, they are anything but ordinary. That is why we honor you. This idea of citizens serving their country sets us apart as Americans. We do not, as President McKinley said, have a military separate from the rest of society, or one whom we fear taking over the government as in some other countries. No, we are one and the same. Thank you, those of you who have served, for understanding and accepting that the Air Force is and must always be of the people, by the people, and for the people. And thank you both for your military service and for your continued contributions to our common pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. America remains human history's most ambitious experiment in democracy and self-government. We're not perfect, and we're still striving to get this thing called freedom right. As Cornell University professor Barry Strauss describes America, We are a New England town hall meeting stuck in the middle of a Los Angeles freeway traffic jam. It's going to be interesting to see how we work it out. But one thing remains constant in our society: the service of the men and women in uniform who every day and in every way continue to just do their jobs. That very fact has saved the country. Another president from Ohio, Rutherford Hayes, who not only served but was wounded in combat during the Civil War, came here to Dayton on an occasion exactly like this one. It was July 30, 1884, and the event was the dedication of the Veterans Monument, which still stands at the north end of Main Street in downtown Dayton. On that hot July afternoon so long ago, President Hayes said this: "Your monument is a magnificent structure. It is a monument that speaks out in eloquence to every man that bore arms in defense of his country. It was not the wonder that 1,000,000 men sprang to save the Union, but that they melted away and drifted back into good citizens. That is why we erect monuments to them. To all of you that we honor today and that we continue to honor in the future, thank you for just doing your job."
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Ladies and gentlemen, in honor of those who have served our nation and their families, taps will now be played by Tech Sergeant retired Eric Knorr from the University of Dayton. During the sounding of taps, it is customary for military members in uniform to render a salute and for civilians to place their right hand over their heart. Please be seated. Thank you to all of our speakers today for sharing the wonderful stories. The Legacy Data Plate program is constantly growing, and new stories are being told on this wall each year. Some of you, like the family and friends of Colonel Dale Berger, are here to celebrate even though your plate is not yet mounted. We sincerely thank you all for joining us. On behalf of the Air Force Museum Foundation Board of Trustees, thank you all for attending the 2016 Legacy Data Plate Wall of Honor Tribute Ceremony. We hope you have a safe and happy Memorial Day weekend as you remember those who have sacrificed for our freedom. For more information on the Legacy Data Plate program or to view stories of those honored, please visit the membership desk in the main atrium or log on to www.legacydataplates.com. At the conclusion of the Air Force song, we invite all of our guests to come forward to view the Wall of Honor, share stories, and place flowers at the wall. This concludes today's ceremony. Please stand for the playing of the Air Force song.
have a data plate for my big brother Greg, who passed away about a year and a half ago. He was a member of this museum. I now have a membership under his same member number. He loved coming here. He had served in the Air Force in Guam. And then I was having a conversation with a family friend about the Air Force, and my uncle Norman served in World War II. Now at the time the Air Force hadn't yet existed, but so he was with what's called the USAAF. And I like to point out that sound, which I heard from one of the speakers, is the sound of freedom. It's great to hear those planes. At any rate, we arranged to have data plates for both my Uncle Norman and my brother Greg, and they are side by side on this data plate wall. We're also here with a family friend who has her father here, because when her father passed away, I told her about these data plates. I thought it would be a comfort to her family. So I'd like to thank the Air Force Museum, because I can say firsthand it's a great comfort to me to know that my brother and my uncle are being honored on this wall. Actually, I would encourage people to, yes, do the data plate wall. My only regret, I realize I could have done this for my brother before he passed away. He would have been so deeply honored. So instead of thinking of it as something that must be done posthumously, it's a way to honor and to thank veterans for their service while they're still here on the earth.